Hey girl, yes, you. You are seen, you are loved, and you were made for more. Created especially for teen girls, chart-topping Christian artist Ann Wilson invites you to her 40-day devotional, Hey Girl, through honest stories, scripture, and journal prompts. Ann talks about real struggles, comparison, insecurity, doubt, and faith, reminding you that God is always near and fighting for you. Hey Girl, from K-Love Books. Get your copy today at klove.com/books.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation, as usual, as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks. I'm so glad you can join us today, and I hope you've been enjoying the holiday season. Today, we are going to be talking about dementia isn't something you fix. It's really something you have to face. So, with no further ado, let's go ahead and introduce you to our guest. Well, Glenna, I am so excited to have you with us today. I've been looking forward to chatting with you. But before we get started, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, if you don't mind. You can do a much better job than I can, and just give us a little background of how'd you fall into this space.
My name is Glenna Hecht, and I am professionally a speaker and a consultant and an author. And I've always been in service industry, started my own consulting firm. And then one day I found myself having a brand new job title, and that was caregiver, with no rule book, no handbook, no guidepost, no map. And so juggling that with what I did in my livelihood and what I did as service on the side, and really trying to keep the pieces together when I was caregiving for my mom for 9 years. And so the generation of what I wrote in a book about a game I developed, and just my whole experience, was what I was bolting on in addition to life. So I think most of the folks that are listening and viewing our conversation, say to themselves, how do I deal with this whole dementia and Alzheimer's thing, plus life, plus my kids, plus my house, plus my husband, and everything feels like a plus, plus, plus. And so I walked your path. I lived in a similar situation, and didn't do great all the time, but ended up doing extremely well with it. And that really set me on a path to put all the things that I found on paper and to share them in the hopes that it will make people's lives and livelihood and relationships so much better through dementia.
Wonderful. Now, the thing about caregiving and, or care partnering, care companion, carers, there's all kinds of words out there that people use, is that there's not a perfect path. And it's just like any other day of your life. You're not always going to be 100%. You're lucky if you're 80%, in terms of getting your list done and what you want to accomplish. But it's even more difficult when we don't give up all those other titles and roles. We just add another one on.
Absolutely.
High priority and high stress. And again, there's no handbook, there's no training. So, you're just kind of in the deep end all by yourself initially, trying to tread water with it all. So I think that's really important for people to understand, because I hear that all the time. I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing enough. I'm not sure, there's just all this anxiousness. And yet life is about adapting as we go and learning as we go. And I think we need to talk more about applying that attitude to caregiving as well.
Absolutely. Well, and I also think it really depends on who you are as a human being. My whole vocation was human resources for large companies, and I would go into an organization and fix things. And, when there are problems with employees, you fix them. And so my first inclination was, I can fix my mom. If she's broken with dementia, I'll figure the magic sauce, the special sauce, and, somehow or another, she'll return back to who she was before. Well, that doesn't work for you, and that's not realistic in this situation. So I spent a couple of years truly trying to do everything to fix her. And, I can beat this. And that really was not the reality of the situation. And I think most people go through that where you're kind of denying the facts of the reality of the situation. I don't want somebody I love to be going through this. And so how can I make their life and my life easier? And then there's a point where you realize that dementia, particularly, which is what my mom had, is not something that you fix. It's something you face. And the question is, how do you choose to do that? So I was very fortunate in what showed up, and I know we'll talk about that through some Q&A, but every day is different. There's no doing it wrong. There's just showing up and doing the best you can, just like you do with your kids or your spouse or anybody else. So certainly that's a part of it.
Yeah, there's not a playbook for relationships. There's that self-help book, shelf you go to when you feel you're in trouble and you don't really even know if you go to the library or bookstore, where do I look for help? Because there's really not a good category. And that's one of the things that's nice is a lot of the libraries have a dementia-friendly section now that has, information on it. And that's very, very helpful. Now, you wrote your book, and I want to talk about that because in the book itself, I love just the title of it, how old are you today? I mean, that doesn't say dementia right off front, but then, your tagline is dementia, a mother, a daughter, and the game that transformed their lives. And I think your title is brilliant for what you have in the book and how it really became a tool for the two of you to communicate. And it's simple and it's accepting of the disease and it's acknowledging where they're at.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the toughest things to do, which you had just mentioned, getting to that. You can't fix it, you got to face it. And so how do you do that kind of with love and joy and both of you maintaining your sanity and your dignity in the process? But my question is, what made you decide to write the book? Because that's a big step and it's a lot of work. And most people, I don't think, have a clue how long it takes to mentally even jump into it and then actually do it and get it published.
Well, thank you for that question. The answer, I think, will surprise you, Lori. It took me 11 years to write the book. And I started to think about writing it while my mom was still alive. And I said to myself, I don't know exactly how it's going to end. I mean, I know how it's going to end, but not the path that will take us to that point. And then when she passed away, my mom was 19 days shy of 100. So she lived a very, very, very long life, which is a blessing. And then I went through the grieving process, which kids do, right? And then I sat down to write the book, and it was a very shallow book. And I was about this not even a half an inch deep on writing it. And I finally said to myself, I needed to become the person who could put this out there and put it on paper. And I had always been seen as in control in my jobs. I stood up in front of people. I came across beautifully. And I had to be willing to put something on paper that said, I didn't do a great job. I lost my control at one point, and I crawled in my closet and cried for hours. And, I tried everything and none of them worked. And I think the most important piece for me was to say, are you willing to be vulnerable and put this out there? And other people need to know what you've gone through. And then finally, what happened late last year, actually, Lori, was I realized I was given a gift. I was given a game that really other people haven't found or practiced yet. And I had a responsibility to put my ego aside and sit down and put this on paper so that other people could work with it, enjoy it, try it, have hope and relationship with their families. So every Saturday for this entire year up until June, I wrote for 6 hours a day until I said, I'm going to get this done. And I had set a goal by a certain date and it happened. So it was very much about putting me aside and putting you first. And that was really how I positioned writing this book.
Yeah, it is interesting. You said it took you 11 years. I wrote a little children's book that's under 30 pages, and it took me 10 years to put, because I'm a speaker, I'm a trainer. So I story tell, and audiences would always ask, when, put this together. And I'm like, I'm just really not an author. I'm a talker, and then I'm so glad it took that time, because I thought my Betty the Bald Chicken lessons in how to care, I thought that was all about dementia. And actually it's much broader, which I think most books are, in terms of how you can apply these tools if you're dealing with a 2-year-old or a 102-year-old, if it's your spouse or your kid or even yourself sometimes, how you can apply these life lessons and these tools to so many different things. So for mine, I found, this could be used for kids for bullying in school. This could be used for divorce, for chronic illness, for death, for discrimination. I mean, it goes on and on. And here I thought I was writing a children's book, and it's like, that was kind of the muse of it all, that it was like, no, the kids are going to teach the adults, because they view things very different and very authentically. What you were talking about, being vulnerable and being authentic, and they don't worry about being vulnerable because they're just authentic.
They just say what's on their mind. The book went through, it even went through iterations once it was finished. I remember when it was complete and I had worked through it with my editor and then read it, and I said, something's missing here, something that I need to make sure I share. And there are 2 chapters in the middle of the book. One is the art of the game, and the other is the rules of the game. And I wanted to make those very prescriptive for people to be able to say, here's some things that I learned so that you don't stub your toe. And interesting what you said about the many uses for your book and the many views of it. I've had people say to me, I can use this with my child that has special needs. I can use this with my son who's on the spectrum. And so a lot of the things that are in there are similar in that they can be used for many other purposes.
Yeah, I think when it comes to disease and illness, addictions, all of those types of things, we're so used to categorizing them and making them so different that they don't apply to how I live my life over here. And yet they do, because they're all about choice. Both sides are about choice, and how do we choose, and how are we feeling through the process? Because how we're feeling through the process, weighs a lot, in my opinion, on what we make our choices as.
Absolutely.
Do we feel heard? Do we feel validated, or do we just feel put down? And people with dementia talk about that all the time. People are like, well, you look fine. Well, take a peek in my brain and you'll see something different. Or, you don't know how much work this is for me to show up for an hour or 2 and act the way I used to.
Right.
Close to it. I mean, they don't understand the process and how we're reacting to them, or the mirroring effects. When we're anxious, they become anxious, all of those little things. So I love that you have the art of the game and the rules. And I love how you said, just so you don't stub your toe. And sometimes it feels like you cracked your head open. It wasn't just a stubbing your toe.
All the time. And I remembered, for me, there were two words that I kept kind of front and foremost for me. And one was connection and the other one was relationship. And not always in that order, right? But to me, the relationship was the most important thing. And it was being connected each time that I saw her once I figured out the game, but also that even when she was in a different place and she was progressing, how do I find a different way to connect? How do I find a different way to have the relationship? Because that was what I always wanted her to know, was that somebody that she loved was there for her. And there was a point, Lori, where I was sitting with her one day and I walked out to my car and I said, being with all these people with dementia sometimes is the best part of my entire day and week. And it's because they just crave and love and want to be with you. And so it's very much that feeling back and forth. So absolutely, it's the rules of the game and the art of the game were very important to add in as the book was going forward.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. I always tell people my mom was the safest place for me to go. She didn't judge
Yep.
me. As the disease progressed, that ego had left the building.
Yep.
So I didn't have to feel embarrassed when I didn't do things right. I feel like we're very similar in terms of how we lived our lives. I was always the fix it person, both family and professionally. I looked for things that were wrong to fix them. I was that jack of all trades, and I didn't, look to put something down. I just always wanted to improve stuff,
Right.
and yet we don't talk about how do we improve life. And I loved when you talked about connection and relationship, because like for me, it drives me nuts how so often, society has thrown medical and academic terms, and we're supposed to understand them and we're supposed to embrace them. Like I personally can't stand the phrase person-centered care, because I think it's overstated,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I think it's very much under delivered.
Looking for a simple way to stay rooted in God's Word every day? The Daily Bible Devotion app by Salem Media gives you morning and evening devotionals designed to encourage, inspire, and keep you connected with Scripture. Plus, you'll enjoy daily Bible trivia and humor, a fun way to learn and share a smile while growing in your faith. Get the Daily Bible Devotion app for free on both iOS and Android. Start and end your day with God's Word. Search for the Daily Bible Devotion app in the App Store or Google Play Store and download it today.
And most people don't even know what that means at all. Well, I also want to talk to you about, your ritual of asking, how old are you today? Because I think it's a magnificent phrase and really sets things up. And I don't think people understand how that works. So can you explain that to our audience?
Absolutely. I'll share with you kind of the germination of it as well, because the story is funny. It's a really funny kind of experience. I had tried everything, research, support groups. I even became certified as an assisted living manager, and nothing taught me how to interact with my mom. And so if she was scared, I didn't know what the answers were to her questions. I just didn't know what to do. And one day I went to visit her, and she was sitting in a wheelchair in an assisted living facility in Dallas. And it was everything you would imagine, the saggy brown couch, the linoleum floor, the fluorescent lights. And she just sort of, looked at me and looked up and she said, "Oh, the sun is so beautiful." And I was like, "What?" And I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's getting ready to, cross over, and this is a flashback of her life. And she was just in so much joy. She was actually at that time, she was at the beach in Chicago with a friend. They were sitting on the sand and eating out of a little box that they had brought and looking at boys. And she was, flirting and posing and the whole thing. And I kept, every time I visited her after that for about 2 months, I would say, "Are you at the beach?" And she'd go, "No." And that was the end of the conversation. Or I would say, "Are you in your 20s?" And she would say, "No." And so I kept getting shut down. And finally, I realized It was just me. It wasn't her. I was asking the wrong things. So I finally one day just looked at her and said, I have forgotten. How old are you? And her response to me was, she went, guess. And that became the beginning of a game. And so every time I visited her, I would first observe her because I had to make sure that I knew that I wasn't guessing too high or too low because she would get very offended by that. And based on what I saw, I would always start my visits with, may I ask you a question? How old are you? And it was typically, are you this? And she'd say no. And I'd go, are you higher or lower? And we would get to a point where we would guess by decades or every 5-year increments. And finally, we would land on an age. And there was no consistency to it. So that was one of the rules that I put in the book, was that you have to be willing to time travel, because one day she was 85 and one day she was 32 and one day she was 39 and she had just given birth to me. And so it was a really kind of fluid back and forth, Lori. And what was great about it was that I was along for the ride. I was not leading the conversation. I was leading the questions, and then she was leading the conversations. And the more that she spoke, then I would ask her questions about that point in her life. And what I did was I wrote down her answers because I didn't know a lot about those times. And it gave me her history. It gave me some information about her younger growing up years. And that was something I had that I don't think a lot of kids have, right? You ask your parent, tell me what it was like when when I was born, and your mom will probably go, it hurt. That was 100 years ago, and they don't really tell you the whole story. So the beauty of it was, by asking the question in the same order, in the same way, and getting to a point in her life, it did become a ritual. We would ask every single time I saw her. And when she lost her voice, which is very common of people with dementia, she couldn't swallow and, really was on mechanical food. We got to the point where I would have to squeeze her hand. And I would say, squeeze once for yes and two for no. And the Q&A was more limited, obviously, but we were still able to have that conversation literally up until the day before she passed away, which was quite remarkable.
Wow. Did you find the feelings were more emotional, like, or the stories were more emotional, not the feelings? But I always found with my mom, I could just sense, I could feel her actual emotions from that time period.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's because if you think about how we are typically sharing stories, if it's something that's from the past, we're recalling our emotion from the past, but we're not actually necessarily feeling it, right? And the beauty of the game was, when I landed on an age, she wasn't looking at it in the rear view mirror. She was actually there. So, probably my favorite chapter in the whole book is a chapter titled When I Met Me. And it was one of the most remarkable experiences that I think anybody could ever had. But for me, it was just breathtaking. And I walked in when my mom was at that point in a nursing home, and she was sitting at the lunch table, and her arms were like this, and she was kind of going back and forth. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be really interesting. And I played the game with her. And at that point, she was 39 years old. And I was born when she was 39 years old. So the questions were, oh, here you are. Do you have a baby? And yes, she does. And, is it a boy? No, it's not. And it became clear that the baby was me. So imagine you're an adult with your aging parent who thinks they're 39, holding you as a newborn baby. So the whole thing is just, too much to consume. And I asked her questions about, do you love the baby? What do you do with the baby? And she told me while she was doing this and tapping my head. And so it wasn't recollection, it was presence. And it was one of the happiest conversations I had ever had because I heard things I had never heard. And it was also one of the hardest because um, my mom had had a number of miscarriages before she had me. And I was called the miracle baby because I wasn't supposed to happen. And I said to her, do you get much sleep? And my mom's response was no, because I'm afraid if I go to sleep, the baby will die. And I didn't know how to respond. So I got really quiet and I said to myself, just give me the words, give me the words. And I looked at my mom and said to her, I want you to know I saw the baby. And she was like, really? And I go, yes, she's beautiful and she's, grown up a little bit more and she's, experienced and you were a great mom. And she started to smile, and it was almost as though the energy just kind of pooled out of her body onto the floor. And she looked at me and said, can I go to sleep now? And I was like, absolutely. And so she wheeled away, and I sat there and then got in my car and cried for about an hour and a half, as most people would imagine you would do. And some of it was because of the memory, but a lot of it was because I didn't know that was so. I had no idea. And it completely shifted how I felt about the experience, not only of the dementia, but being a baby and knowing how my mom cared for me. So it was rich on many, many, many levels. And really, she was living in that moment. She was a 39-year-old woman. So it was quite remarkable.
Wow. Yeah, there were so many times my mom would kind of be back in time too. And, I didn't use the phraseology you did. I tried to step in and learn more, but it was amazing. Like you said, what you learned that was never shared, and I heard the good, the bad, the ugly, and the joyful, because there was a lot of stuff your parents won't tell you because it's like, oh no, we don't want our kids doing that.
Right. Right.
But we did that. And then I would hear these stories and they were just a hoot, and I'm like, oh, this is funny. And I'd confirm it with their friend. Oh yeah, we used to play cards and, blah, blah, blah. And, it was funny, but then there were those just heartfelt moments where I remember one, and it was just very simple. We were having corn on the cob and my mom's teeth were chipped and broken. And so I asked her, do you want me to cut the corn off the cob? And she looked at me like I was an absolute idiot. And I'm like, no, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, I just thought it might be easier to chew. And she picked up that corn on the cob and she was nibbling it. And she was like so happy. She was just I think she was at like a state fair when she was a young kid.
Love it.
Just engrossed with just this joy. And I knew it was way more than the corn. It was like a full experience of where that corn brought her back to. And I didn't ever really know when, because she was, eating away at it. But I remember so many times going, I would love to be that happy and that peaceful and that joyful. I mean, it's just, you could just feel the energy.
Yeah.
And it was so, so cool. So I think there's many moments like that we can take advantage of if we just let go and step into their world instead of trying to pull them back into ours.
Right.
And, when you look at our world and you look at, I think of even, my mom aging and things, she wasn't working anymore, which she loved. Her kids were grown, so she wasn't kind of the head of the volunteer committee of this, that, and the other. There were a lot of losses. And so she went back to, for the most part, I think really happier times in her life, where she felt, like you said, connected. And that's a gift. I mean, how many times do we sit and reminisce sometimes, if we're feeling lonely, and we'll go back in time, and they say one of the times we go back to the most is kind of our high school, college age years and stuff, because that's probably when we felt the most independent, right or wrong, and the most freedom in our life.
Absolutely.
Everything everything was possible. And then as we age, we kind of put ourselves in a box
Right.
and things, and we feel the responsibility, even like your mom felt that huge responsibility of, I can't go to sleep because I love this child way too much to lose her, and to know that your mom cared that much and she was so tired and exhausted, but you were way more important than all of that,
Right.
to her. I mean, it makes me teary eyed just thinking about it. It's so I do think there are so many gifts wrapped in this disease, that are absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would imagine that you talk with a lot of people and run into them, and they feel guilt and they feel grief and they feel confusion. I find that's kind of what they feel the most, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's anger, like, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to us type thing? And I don't, in the beginning stages, I don't hear so much about the joy,
Yeah.
because
No, you don't. You don't.
it just takes that rug and pulls you off and just dumps you, with no premise of where to go other than, the doctors say, you got 5 to 7 years. Here's a prescription. Here's another appointment. Seeing you in a
Right.
week,
Right.
and that gives us like no guidance. It doesn't give us much for hope. And it just says what you dreamed the rest of your life was going to look like is no more.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you deal with people who are in that space? Because I think it's very common, and yet I don't think a lot of people like to talk about it because they don't like sharing those emotions with others, that they're there, because we're supposed to be better than that. And yet, I don't know, to me, our emotions are, and we feel all of them, and we shouldn't be embarrassed by them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, well, first I would say that it's very natural. The anger, the hurt, the guilt, the why me, everybody that is dealing with a parent, a loved one, a neighbor who has this goes through that. So it's very natural. And when people say something to me, the first thing that I say is take a deep breath with me. And I want you to know that you're a warrior and you're a hero,
Mhm.
because dealing with somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's is not easy. It's just not. And um, give yourself some grace, because there is no rule book, there is no encyclopedia. You don't necessarily know what to do. And even if you know what to do today, it may change tomorrow. And so that's a part of it. That for me, though, was the turning point, Lori. And I had said in the beginning, I tried to do everything to fix her. And one of the things that I did was to go to a support group. And I am inherently an extremely positive person. I'm very creative. The conversation in the room was all about how this is happening to me and how difficult my life is now. And yes, that's true. But my comment to them was, but you can go out and have dinner and have a cocktail. You're not the one with the disease. They are. And so I sat there and in that moment said, I'm going to find a way. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to find a way to have it be different for my mom and I. And I actually did think that and knew that that was going to be something that would happen. I just didn't know what that would look like. And so it was absolutely a choice, which you said in the beginning was how I'm going to relate to somebody that was enriching and fulfilling and a different kind of relationship than what I saw around me, people dealing with the whole dementia. And so I really believe that this game and what I found came out of that commitment to make a difference and to do it differently. But I would say, no, you're not alone. Every person that is in the role of some kind of caregiving feels the same way. And the most important thing to do is to talk to other people, be vulnerable, look at resources, try things, because you don't necessarily know what'll work and you don't know what won't work, but why not try it? And so I think that great question. And it's not something that we hide because of our ego. It's something that we have to step into with a commitment that we can find a way to make it better.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.
Yeah, I agree. I actually kind of refused to go to a support group because I thought I don't have enough time. I don't have any more time to devote to this,
Right.
And I just thought I would get a list of more stuff that I'd have to do. And then I ended up going to a support group and we had a great facilitator because I know a lot of support groups, a lot of times people whine and they just need to vent. And
Right.
that's not what I needed. That's not what I wanted. I didn't
Right.
think that was going to help me. And this facilitator asked one question that totally changed my mind on support groups. And she said, "What is the one thing that you miss the most?" And I thought, oh, how profound is that?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went around and said something. And for me, it was at that point, my mom could no longer give me a hug. And I just missed a hug. And I was like, whoa, and I'm like, okay, I'm coming back. you reeled me in. But so I think, when it comes to support group, you have to figure out what fits for you because
Yes.
some you'll click and some you won't. And that's okay. It's kind of like back in school. You got along with this group, but you didn't so much here, and so what's going to work for you? And there's nothing right or wrong with that. And
Correct.
many people go to multiple groups too, and that's okay. But one of the things that I really loved was when I heard about the memory cafes from over in the UK. And I got so much pushback trying to start one here in Minnesota, and they're for people with dementia and their care partners to be together. Oh,
Nice.
You can't have them together. What would they? Well, where do you think they are the rest of the day? Because most of them are couples.
And assisted living with everybody, yes.
Yeah, or good friends or whatever it might be. So it's like, to me, it's about living graciously and
Yes.
then being able to hear both sides of the story. Because for as much grief as we have, they've got it too.
Yeah.
They're scared. They don't want to be less than or viewed as less than. They don't want their life to end short. I mean, there's a lot of major things. They don't want to have to quit work, especially for men who a lot of times were the primary or only, income provider, back in the day. And so there's just, so much there for all of us in terms of independence and dignity. And I think we can learn from one another. And I also found with those people were more vulnerable faster and more forgiving because everybody was in the same boat. Everybody understood. And there was more laughter because they were so happy to see their loved ones interact with somebody because a lot of times they had lost that. And for them to be able to have friendships again, that just brought the caregiver so much joy on top of the person diagnosed. And everybody, it just fed, they just all fed one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's all different types of groups out there for people to be able to take part in. But I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's, and even after the journey's done, some of them, I know here in Minnesota, we started a reentry program. Like, what do I do now as a caregiver? I don't even know who I am. People ask me what I like. I don't know. I haven't asked myself that for 10 years.
For years. Right. Right.
And for me, I kind of did some traveling on my own. I never really did that before, but it's like, I don't know how to answer that question. I really don't know what I want, And so, I think it's just letting go of that control that we all think we have, and we
Right.
don't. But we do have control over the choices we make in terms of how we're going to interact or how we're going to accept our situation. Are we going to make adaptations and make the best of it? Because, like you said earlier, there's so many gifts wrapped in this journey, but you're never going to find them if you're not going to open up to look for them or believe
Absolutely.
they would even exist there.
Absolutely.
You also talk about heartbreak and humor in the
Yes.
journey. And I always find that people like shut down the humor because it's so serious you can't laugh. And yet, to me, I always felt that was the glue that kind of held me together on the journey. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Absolutely. And I think I didn't walk into situations with an anticipation of what I was going to find because I never knew what I was going to find, right? So I experienced both heartbreak and humor, and one that was just hilarious. When my mom first went into assisted living, she kind of ate everything in sight. And I, knew it was like the freshman 15, when we went to college and ate pizza for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she added a few pounds. And so one day she was getting a shower and I was helping her. And she starts to do this, looking in the mirror, kind of front and side and posing. And she looks at me and says, "Do you think I'm pregnant?" And at that point, I think she was 94, right? And I was in the inside, I was dying. I literally was just about to explode and laugh. And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, I'm not thinking that's a possibility unless there's something that you need to tell me." I don't know. And in a moment, the next moment, the thought was gone, And so I walked out into the hall, and I mean, just howled, going, "How funny is that?" That's the first thing that would go through their mind. And there were just so many times that she would say things that would not only crack me up, but crack both of us up. And the heartbreak stuff happens on the other side as well. There's an experience that I wrote a chapter about, and I really, again, struggled with, do I even want to put this on paper? And I walked in one day and my mom was screaming at a man, and he was cowering against the wall. That's how, scary she was. And she was tiny. And it took three people to try and calm her down. And I had never in my life not only seen her like that, but hear come out of her mouth what I heard. And when they got her calmed down and sat her down and gave her some water, I started to play the game with her. And at that point, she was 32 years old. So I wasn't born yet. I was just a person who was visiting. And the moment that I knew how old she was, I knew exactly what was going on. And she had been married before. She was on her honeymoon and only was married a couple of weeks because the man that she was married to tried to drown her. And she was fighting for her life. No other way to put it. And the moment I knew how old she was, and the moment I knew the experience she was in, the only thing that made sense for me to do was to just sit and hold her hand. And she thought I was a stranger. I wasn't her daughter, but my commitment was I'm going to be the nicest, most kind stranger you've ever met, because this was obviously a horrible experience for her. So, I didn't know about her anger until that moment, and didn't know about some of the humor until those moments, but it was a willingness to show up and go, "Who are you today? And how old are you?" And it would just kind of weave and move as time went on. So it's really just being present and open to where their mind goes that given day and the gifts that are in that. Because in that moment, even though it was difficult, I learned a lot about her as well. And so that was just another wonderful piece that I was given.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, we all have those moments in our life
Hmm.
where things are scary. and we feel in danger and stuff. So to be able to identify that is really important. I know my daughter only knew her grandma with dementia. And my listeners, some of them have heard this story before, but my mom was in the nursing home, and they were having this big party outside, 100 people, and they had the grills going. Everything was beautiful. And my daughter, who was like 18, was hanging out with my mom. My mom's in this big Jerry wheelchair, and I'm helping other people in wheelchairs come out. And every time I look, they're like laughing and they're having a good time. And just as I'm walking in my last person, I hear my mom screaming, which she normally didn't do. And she's screaming at my daughter, I hate you. I hate you. Leave me alone. And my daughter's running over and her lips quivering. She's just,
I'm sure.
And she's just like, Mom, she hates me. She hates me. And they were always two peas in a pod. Her grandma never talked to her like that. And I said, honey, Grandma doesn't hate you. What happened? She's like, I don't know. She just exploded. She was eating a cookie and a piece fell on her chest. And I said, okay. I said, well, what did you do? She said, I went to pick up the cookie and she just exploded. And I said, honey, there's always a reason.
Yes, absolutely.
I said,
absolutely.
So let's break it down. Tell me what happened. Mom, I just told you what happened. And I'm like, no, we need to go deeper. So you were sitting and talking to Grandma. I saw you doing that. So you were talking and laughing. Were you holding Grandma's hand? Yeah, I always hold Grandma's hand. I said, did you have eye contact? Well, of course I had eye contact, Mom. And I said, what made you decide to pick up the cookie? She's like, Mom, I don't know where you're going. I said, no, I need you to think about this. Why did you decide to pick up the cookie in that moment? And she said, oh, there was a break in the conversation. So you weren't talking and laughing anymore. Were you still holding Grandma's hand? Well, no, I had to get up because I was sitting next to her. In order to get the cookie, I had to stand up to reach down to get the cookie. I said, so did you have eye contact? And she said, well, no, I had to look at the cookie. I said, so you weren't talking and laughing. You weren't holding her hand and you didn't have eye contact, and you reached in and you touched her in an inappropriate spot for a stranger. I said, in that nanosecond, you lost 3 powerful connections, honey. And we're so oblivious to our connection.
Absolutely.
And, and that was totally it. It. And I had the same thing happen. I was massaging my mom's legs one day, and then for whatever reason, I said, do you want me to do your shoulders? Kind of did it in reverse. And my mom said, yes. So I popped up and I went behind her, but I wasn't talking or touching her. As I did that, I put my hands on her and she screamed at me too. It didn't take much to break that connection.
Something happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And we forget about how important that is so often. And, I always wondered, was my mom, raped or something when she was younger? And of course they would never talk about that. Or was it just the whole stranger danger thing that we teach our kids?
Right.
And it could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
So yeah, great story about connections and how powerful they are and what they bring us back to. Well, we do need to wrap up. I could talk with you all day though, Glenna.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
I do want to ask if when you first, decided to write your book, did you have any goals for the book? And have those changed at all for you?
Oh my God, yes. So initially it was get it done after 11 years. And my goal initially was it had to be done by June the 20th, which would have been my mom's 109th birthday. And actually it was done a few days before and then massaged. And so it was really to get it out into the world. And I launched, I think I may have shared with you on September the 16th. So it's fairly new. And I'm getting a lot of really powerful feedback, people giving it to other people saying I'm trying it and it's working, and we're having great conversations. So about 8 weeks in, somebody said to me the question and asked what you just said, which is, what's your goal for this? And I opened my mouth and the words popped out and I wasn't exactly sure where they came from. but I am committed to selling 200,000 books and donating $2 million to Alzheimer's dementia research. And I'm giving profits from the book, obviously, to that, and it's just a start. Do I think it's possible? Absolutely. Do I have to live my commitment in a different way to get there? Absolutely. So the speaking and the writing and all the things that I want to do, but I think it's an important goal. Not enough out there to talk about relationship. We really don't have a lot of written word that gives something substantial for people to try. So I hope folks will. But also, the more that we can support research and what we can do to help people before, during this, and caregivers is really critical to me. So yes, my goal changed quite dramatically after the publication of the book, and I'm sure it will continue to do so, but it's definitely something that is so important to me, and I think to the world as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, have you connected with All's authors at all? Because
I have I've sent out lots of notifications about podcasts and media and speaking, and as much as I possibly can in the last 13 weeks since it's been, publicized. So I think I am at the very beginning stages, and now I'm learning, what else is out there that I can reach out to. So, of course, any recommendations that you have are graciously accepted, and wanting to get this in the hands of people that I think can give you some hope.
Okay, great. Well, I will connect you with All's authors. That
Thank
is
you.
now being taken over by All Home Cares Matters with Lance A. Slatton, and he also has a podcast.
Excellent.
But they have like 400 authors, and there was none of that, and it was, I think 3 ladies started it, about 10 years ago.
Great.
And it's just kind of grown. So it's nice to see that there's that many authors, and they review the books and make sure they're appropriate and stuff.
Sure.
But that would be a really good place for you to be positioned on, as well as joining us on Dementia Map too.
Would love that. Would love that.
Great. Well, I am so thrilled to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for your time today, Glenna. And again, go out and purchase her book. The book is called How Old Are You? Dementia, a Mother, a Daughter, and the Game That Transformed Their Lives. Each of you listening, I always ask you to be a giver of hope, like, click, and share, not because we're tracking numbers, but because we know you have people in your sphere of influence that need this information.
Yep.
You might not know they need it because people don't share that stuff until they're well into it. But let's get this information out to people earlier to be able to help them. Mm-hmm.
By the by, and it's on Amazon, it's in Barnes and Noble, it's wherever you buy anything, I guess. And so it is out there. But thank you so much.
Wonderful. And they can go to your website, howoldareyoutaday.com.
Mm-hmm.
She's also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and we'll have all that information for you there. So again, thank you, Glenna, so much for taking time. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
So in wrapping up, I want to give a shout out to Q for Good. They are my webmasters. I adore them. They're easy to work with. They're reasonably priced, and they get stuff done on time. So check them out. If you want to mention my name, you'll get, I think it's a 10% discount as well. And just as a reminder, alzheimerspeaks.com. Check out our free educational resources along with Dementia Map, our global resource directory, which we're building out. And if you are in need of a book, like a children's book, but all ages say they get something out of it, feel free on Alzheimer's Speaks or go to Amazon or your bookstore and purchase Betty the Bald Chicken, Lessons in How to Care. It's a short book. It's got some little questions in there, but the feedback's been fabulous. And it can be used not just for dementia, but for bullying, for children. It can be used for discrimination. It can be used for mental health. It can be used for chronic illnesses, death, divorce. They're all areas where we need care. So with that, I'm going to close out, and I wish you all a fabulous new year. Bye now.
Hi, everyone. This is Meredith from the Senior Fitness with Meredith podcast, where I discuss all things for seniors, from fitness, your health and wellness journeys, how to be all over strong and beyond. I also have my mini podcast called Motivation with Meredith. It's a great, quick motivational pick-me-up for your days. Join me, listen now, search for Senior Fitness with Meredith on your favorite podcast platform.